to put the weight of the world on your shoulders, feeling like you're never going to be enough, right? We can do that. So those are the origins of what I call a weapon of mass deception. And I point those out, and I think that's why you wanted me to talk about it. They're also the causes of drift, right? If you are going through those things, you should expect drift.
Hi, welcome to Veteran CEO Magazine, where veterans lead the way. I'm Jay Hernandez, and today my guest is Adam Jones. Adam, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Now, Adam is the founder of Kingdom Operatives and the author of Weapons of Mass Deception, the silent struggle within every high performer. Before that, Adam was in the Colorado Army National Guard as a company commander of an aircraft maintenance company and a UH-60 Blackhawk pilot, where he served for 10 years. So, Adam, as we do these VCEO interviews, the first prompt that I always ask our guests is in 6 words or fewer to describe their personal transition out of the military into civilian life. What are your 6 words, sir?
I believe it's what we suppress spreads.
This is a very personal topic to you. I know that we've talked about the challenges that this faces. So let's dive right into this. Why did you choose these words for your personal transition story?
For me, my entire life, I wanted to be a Blackhawk pilot in the Army. I was very passionate about that. I mean, I'm talking about like 5, 6 years old. That's the life I wanted. And I made all my decisions about that. I was, I'm sure people listening right now are familiar with kind of identifying as being a high achiever, high performer, someone who always wants to do more and maybe become more in the process. And that was me. And, one day I'm going to fast forward, but one day I became a Blackhawk pilot. I went through a lot of challenges and adversity, but overall it happened. And I remember when I was living that life and I was flying the aircraft, and I started flying at 12 years old, actually, through Civil Air Patrol too. So I was just put myself on that track. But when I started flying and then started to work with the military on a full-time status in the Guard, over time, we all run into this, but you kind of feel like, man, the weight of the world's on my shoulders. I feel pretty on edge. I feel like I'm not really giving my best to my family. And I made the decision, even though I achieved my childhood dream, to one day step away from it. And I did it for a selfless reason. It was so that my wife could start to have maybe the life that she envisioned, right? Which would be a little bit more flexibility and freedom, more travel, live wherever you want. Her husband gets to have a nice beard, those types of things.
The things we all really want.
That's it, right? Yeah. No more PT tests. No, I'm just kidding. But the big thing was I just realized, like, I'm going to leave for them. And them would mean my wife and my daughter. I was a new dad when I became a company commander. I think I was around like 26 years old, 27 years old. And about a year and a half into being a father, I kind of felt like, man, I'm not really doing too well here. I thought I would get this right. But overall, I feel like my mind's not really fully with them. So I'm going to get out of the military. So what I did is I made the decision to get out after 10 years of service, and I got out as a captain. And I felt that would solve everything. That if I get out, it would get out of me. That if I made myself more available to my family, that a lot of these issues and maybe even my stress and tension and those things that were in me would start to go away because I was no longer around that type of environment. I'm sure you can relate.
There's something within the military community about 10 years. 10 years is kind of a critical moment for a lot of people in their careers because it's a moment of either do I stay in or do I get out? You're halfway to 20 on there. So 10 years comes up as a big moment for a lot of people. So let's just talk about when you got out. Was it what you expected?
Well, no. So when I got out, I thought I was going to be the hero of my home. No joke. I mean, I thought it was like, I am doing a very hard thing. I'm giving up my childhood dream. I like flying. I like commanding. I like taking care of soldiers. Like, I enjoyed that, but there were aspects of me that seemed to be falling apart and falling away in my home as well, right? There were some indicators of my home being not a home of peace, a home of stress, of tension. And I thought if I get out, it'll fix everything. And, kind of where I was going with this is I made myself available, but only a couple months after getting out of the military, I remember my wife one day looking at me. She was like, Adam, what did I just say? I don't know if anyone ever had that happen to them before, right?
A
And
couple of
I
times.
said, oh, well, yeah, I was like, oh, you said this, this, and this. And I'm sitting at the kitchen table while she's putting away like some groceries, just got back from work. Our daughter's sitting over at the couch. Dogs are kind of running around barking a little bit. And I passed the test. I got the answer right. I knew what she just said, but she could see past, I guess, my words and the answer I gave. And she could like see, I think, into, I'm not trying to be too deep, but it's like she could see into me, right? Into my eyes, my tired eyes that were foggy and hazy in a point of transition. And what she did is she said, where are you right now? I was like, what do you mean, where am I? She said, you're not here. You're never here. I don't know where you are, but it's not here. And I don't think you want to be here. And she said, you better figure it out because I'm not going to stay here and keep this going. And in that moment, I kind of realized, wait, I'm not being celebrated as the hero of my home. Instead, I'm being told this isn't enough. How is this not enough? How did I go through a process of getting everything I wanted in life, choosing to let it go, and then now making myself available as a father and a husband, being told I'm not present? And what I had to learn, Jonathan, is that availability does not equal presence. That you can be available. We've all had people in our life who are available, who are there, but they're not fully there. They're not present. And that was my biggest struggle with my transition is I didn't know how to reset, to let it go, to figure out who I was without all the other things attached to me. And without even recognizing it, the same struggle that I was going through in uniform got worse when I got out. And that's
Was
why I say, well, we suppress spreads because what I didn't recognize until further down the line was after Jess called out my drift. And that's what I say, what she was doing. She was calling out, hey, you're drifting in life. This is not okay. You are not on track. You are not present. And I'm not going to stay here for all of this. And when she called it out, what I had to recognize is she was calling it out also because it was affecting her. That's why what I say is what we suppress spreads. I thought I could suppress being stressed out, being depressed, being exhausted, feeling angry. Like if I could just bury it, no one will know. But somehow it was like in my energy alone, it could spread through me and the way I spoke and the way I moved, and my home became the same way. So what I suppressed was spreading to my wife and my daughter and to those around me. And that realization is what gave me the strength to start to fight and say, I can't stay here. This is not the life that is intended for me. And I'm not going to allow myself to be this person who's failing as a father and a husband and thinking maybe life would be better off without me.
one of the things that you mentioned just a second ago, and I know you've talked about previously, is the drift. The fact that you're able to actually see this, identify it, give it a definition, I think is one of those steps that a lot of service members, they're going to encounter a similar thing. Talk to me a little bit about how you came to identify the drift and define it that way.
This is part of realizing that the drift may define where you are, but it doesn't define who you are. Let me give a quick example. When I was a UH-60 Blackhawk pilot, I was in the right seat of the helicopter. I had my pilot in command to my left and my crew chief behind me, and we were doing a medic hoist mission, right? Dropping a medic down on a hoist. And without recognizing it, see, I thought my aircraft was perfectly stable and centered. I had my night vision goggles on. I'm hearing the commands of the crew chief. I'm making the small adjustments. And without realizing it, my aircraft started to drift to the left. I didn't see it. My crew chief did. So my crew chief called it out and said, hey, sir, drifting left. Now, at that point, when a pilot is told the aircraft is drifting, there's probably some things you would hope. You probably hope that the pilot would say, oh, I hear you. Okay. You probably would hope the pilot would stop the drift and make the adjustment. But instead, I was so consumed with the fact that I was drifting and I didn't see it. And I didn't want to blow it, like I was a younger pilot at the time. Like I was trying to set up a reputation for myself and show that I knew what I was doing. And here I am doing this high stakes mission and my aircraft is drifting. So anyways, I was immature about this. And what I did is I stayed quiet. And just a couple minutes or a couple seconds later, it might feel like minutes, but it is seconds later where I heard again, "Sir, you are drifting left." And I heard this escalation in the urgency and in the volume that was being shouted. And I said, "Oh, Roger, got it. Sorry, man, I'm getting hit really hard with the winds right now. I'm trying to make some adjustments. I'm going to push the aircraft a little bit to the right, coming right." And I give this big, long explanation, and my crew chief goes, "Sir, no one cares. Just fix it." So I push the aircraft to the right, I stabilize it, and the crew decides, pull the medic back up and let's get out of here. So we pull the medic back up off, from the hoist, coming up into the aircraft, shutting the cabin door, pulling power, and coming up at a 200-foot hover. By the way, that whole scenario I just gave you, we were surrounded by trees. So the drift is even more significant because I only have a few seconds to make adjustments or we will crash. All right. So this is a very high stakes moment. And we came up over the trees and had a little heart to heart with the new platoon leader, right? And they said, "Hey, what was that?" I was like, "What are you talking about? What was that?" I just didn't catch it. I'm sorry. I'll try to make the adjustments next time. They're like, "No, no, no. What was all the explanations? Why did you stay quiet when I called it out? And then when I called it out again, you gave this big long explanation about your drift. We don't care that the aircraft's drifting. We're in the aircraft with you. We just need you to acknowledge it." And this is the whole point, right? My crew chief was telling me, this drift doesn't define you. We don't care about the fact that the aircraft moved out of position. What we care is that your ego got in the way and you want to acknowledge the fact that it was actually drifting. And you made the situation worse because with each passing second, we became closer to a crash. Pretty big deal, right? And we can do this with our life, can't we? We can start to drift in life and say, "I'm just going to hide it. No one's going to see it." And what drift to me is like, you set an intention for what you want and then you do something else, or you get different results. You could drift in your fitness. You could drift in your faith. You could drift with like your relationships, your spouse, your kids, boyfriend, girlfriend, coworkers, team members. And you're like, "Man, I feel like I'm kind of losing myself right now, or I'm off." And we try to hide it instead of empowering other people to call it out. So here's the quick steps. First thing, someone needs to announce the drift, whether that is you or someone else who has a different perspective. I couldn't see the drift of my aircraft. My crew chief could. So he called it out, right? Next thing is someone needs to acknowledge the drift. "Hey, you're right. We are drifting. Hey, you're right. I have been angry lately. Hey, you're right. I don't know who I am without my uniform." And leave it right at that. No more explanation. It's not time yet. It's just time to acknowledge it. Then you reach a step where you can assess the situation and you can assess what's causing the drift and what do I actually want. Announce, acknowledge, assess. That is really the framework that kind of led me to building out the book Weapons of Mass Deception too, right? Is that I was suppressing it, thinking it wasn't hurting anyone else, my struggle, my stress, all that stuff. And when I realized that what I was suppressing was spreading to other people, I had to what? Acknowledge that. When my wife said, "You're not here," my next role, my next job was to say, "You're right." Not to give her all the reasons or why. "Oh, it's because I'm overwhelmed. It's because I'm working so hard. I'm just trying to pay the bills. I'm trying to provide for you,
Mhm.
It's not time for that. The first step is to say, "Yes, I acknowledge that." Then we figure out the next piece.
As you tell the story about the crew chief who was able to call out an action, crew chiefs are trained to do that. That is an action that they are trained to identify, call it out. And if even so much as to where if there's not an immediate acknowledgement, to say it again, almost as a process for this. But when we talk about our families aren't necessarily trained the same way, but there's still that vital capability of understanding. They're on the same team. They're all on the same journey together. Do you find it's one of those areas where families, as you're entering this period of transition together, that they have permission to call that out?
Yes. So when we're working, so my company, Kingdom Operatives, we work with military installations, Army, Air Force. We work with skill bridge programs. We work with high performing communities just in general, companies like Salesforce and Zoom. I've ran events for, and we've been able to equip them with what we're talking about today. And I'll tell you what, a huge part of this is recognizing exactly what you said. That crew chief was trained to do that. Are you training and creating a culture where people can call out the drift and not feel uncomfortable doing it? Because it can be uncomfortable. to say, hey, I'm kind of like walking on eggshells around you lately. Hey, every day you come home, you complain. Like, well, yeah, it's because it's like, no, you're right. I have been complaining. We do have to start to have the conversations. This is something I'm sharing with some of the spouses, right? Is make sure you have the conversation to say, hey, I know we're getting out of the military and we have some big expectations of what that life might look like, but it's also probably not going to go all according to plan. And some things might. I'm just going to look out for you and us and let you know what I'm seeing. And I think also the best case scenario would be if that service member said this a similar conversation to their family and their spouse and things like that, to say, hey, I'm going to go through probably a transition according to what everyone's telling me. This is pretty significant, I guess, to let go of the uniform and that lifestyle. And I think I'm gonna be fine, but if I'm not, just let me know. And this is like expectation management, isn't it? See, when I got out of the military, what did I think? I thought it was my solution. I thought I would no longer be stressed, no longer be maxed out and overwhelmed if I just created space. Well, it was happening in me, not just around me. You see what I'm saying? It wasn't about just my schedule or my daily events. It was how I was seeing life. And man, if you can just have that conversation that you're talking about, to say, I have high expectations, but it could change and you might see me drift. Could you just call it out? I'm okay with that if you call it out. I might not see it first. In the example, when Jess told me I wasn't present, I didn't know how bad I was hurting until she and a mentor of mine began to tell me. I thought this was because you only see life through your eyes. So like, yeah, life's tiring, life's exhausting, life is hard. Oh, well, I'm getting paid a lot of money for my job, way more than I was getting paid in the Army. I'm a program management project management professional, being a program manager. Like, I should be happy. I'm not allowed to feel this way. Well, it doesn't matter if you're not allowed to feel this way. I can see that this is not you and something is off and we need to start to fix it. And we can work as a team to do that.
Something that you write about is how transition is an origin of the weapon. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, this kind of brings in the conversation of like, why did I name a book Weapons of Mass Deception? And it's for the exact phrase that I gave you, what we suppress spreads. I believe when we look at things such as over the course of the Iraq to Afghanistan war, right? I'm given like a 14-year time frame. The DoD casualty report stated that they had just a little under 7,000 service members killed in action. Okay. In the same 14 years, they estimated over 73,000 service members and veterans took their own lives. 7,000 versus 73,000, right? To me, what I began to see is bombs and bullets have not been our greatest threat when it comes to warriors and protectors and soldiers, airmen, sailors. Like, there's something else happening to our population from within. And I didn't have any trauma in my life that I could point to that made me feel the way I felt. Look, man, I got to a point where I didn't want to live anymore. And I wouldn't even acknowledge that. I would just get angry. I'd get in the car and I'd smash the gas. And I would listen to the worst kind of music, Limp Bizkit. All right. Slipknot, I don't know, all that type of stuff, and just blast it and get so angry about how I was handling, about how I was letting my wife down, about how I wasn't following through on the smallest things. And I would just hit the gas and, sometimes not want to stop. And I get so reckless, and I didn't realize what that was. Like, what that was. That's called suicidal ideation, right? That's even like starting that process of putting yourself in a position where you might take your life. To me, I couldn't call it what it was. I didn't call out my drift, not as clearly as I do now. Even when the book came out, I couldn't call it out that clearly, because it was very hard for me to acknowledge that is a category of suicide, right? And I say all this because I didn't have trauma, all right? And I thought trauma was the qualifier for the struggle. I thought trauma was it's called PTS, post-traumatic stress. Well, I don't have PTS. I didn't see a combat zone or anything like that. I didn't have a bad upbringing. I had good parents, you know. I'm not allowed to feel this way. That's what I thought. And then I began to see in myself and in other conversations all these service members who were struggling, and they all had different stories. One was a Marine for 4 years, got out, never deployed. Another one was a Marine for 12 years, deployed 3 times, and feels like it was never enough. Another one was, Air Force first sergeant. Another one was a colonel in the Army, and like a Bronze Star recipient who was about to take his life because he felt like he didn't deserve it and he didn't know who he was without the military. And I'm thinking, what the heck is happening to us? And again, not everyone could point to trauma. And that's when I began to see what was happening to me was I was going through transition. And transition was a key origin of what I call a weapon of mass deception. And we can talk about that in just a moment, but I'll make sure I hit on the other origins of this, what I call a weapon, right? Because again, bombs and bullets haven't been the greatest threat. So there's something else attacking like a weapon our population, and not just military, I think high performers. So let's bring it all together with this. The 4 origins of the weapon are trauma. So that's one, but that wasn't me. Another one is transition. I was absolutely going through transition. I even moved from Colorado to Pittsburgh. I stopped flying an aircraft. I stopped being a company commander. I had a new corporate job. Okay, and then timing, certain timings of life, saying by now I should be here. I'm 30 years old. By now I should have a house. By now I should be married, right? That's timing. And then the last one is training. We can train ourselves, and our organizations can train us to suppress, to bury it, to put the weight of the world on your shoulders, feeling like you're never going to be enough, right? We can do that. So those are the origins of what I call a weapon of mass deception. And I point those out, and I think that's why you wanted me to talk about it. They're also the causes of drift, right? If you are going through those things, you should expect drift, not hide it, not ignore it, expect it. When I got out, what did I expect? Freedom. I had huge expectations of how great this was going to be and how much it would solve everything, which is why I think it hurt even more. My recommendation is someone who's getting out, don't expect this to be a smooth ride right away. If you think, well, I got a new job and I already got my house squared away, I'm good. Mm-hmm. Are you? It's okay if you're not. It's okay if you are now and 2 months later you're not, because you did a hard thing and you're going through a hard thing that most of the world cannot relate to, which is letting go of like a huge source of identity and structure and expectations in your life.
And what are the things that you can do ultimately once you start drifting? How do you pull it back?
You do have to detach where you are from who you are and say, yes, my aircraft is off course. That is reality. And that doesn't mean, I myself am not valuable now that I'm not performing so well. It means this is my opportunity to get better, right? The struggle can produce strength if it's used appropriately. And one way it's not used appropriately is if you just bury it and you ignore it and you think one day I'll have time to come back to that. This is like the most important thing you can do, is figure out who you are without anything else. And I didn't know who I was when I was no longer all of these other things and these associations. And I didn't realize how dependent I was on it. But when I got out, you know what I did? I added a whole bunch of things to my calendar. That's what I did. I said, I'm going to join a ministry. I'm going to start my own ministry. I'm going to start a business. I'm going to be on podcasts. I'm going to be an executive coach. I am not exaggerating. I did all those things at the same time while working a full-time corporate job. And my wife's going, what the heck is this? And it's like, well, I just want to make an impact. I want to help people. I don't want to waste my life. I want to make sure I'm aggressive with this moment so I don't lose myself. I'm going to take everything as fast as I can and transition it over. Nope. You really got to give yourself space to see if the struggle starts to show up. And if it does, no, it is absolutely normal, because you're entering a new culture. The things we do things to us. The organizations we are in and the way they operate become the way we see life, right? So what I had to begin to realize is, man, people are not as driven as we were. They're weird. What the heck's wrong with them, right? Man, people talk about all this small talk, boring stuff. Like, who are these like civilians? And I know, like, I had a guard background, but I was active for 7 out of the 10 years. So I was doing that thing every day. I did feel like the military became, my normal culture. And being on base, I was at Buckley Air Force Base in Colorado a lot. And those type of things, I remember coming out thinking people don't get me. And I was frustrated with them. They don't get me. Yeah, you're right. Why should they? Well, they don't know that I did this. And, like, now I'm just an individual contributor. I used to have 100 soldiers. I had 12 direct reports. I had officers and first sergeants. Like, I had a lot of responsibility and authority. And now I'm just a project manager without a team. No, I should be at that level. And you begin to think people don't get me. And I just need everyone to realize, yes, you are right. And how could you expect them to get us? We are the 1% who is integrating back into the 99%. Give yourself a lot of grace to recognize you're the one who's going to need to make some adjustments. They don't need to change for us. We need to start to say, this is a new way of operating. It's not as clear and structured. It doesn't give me the exact expectations of how I need to move and think and stand and put my hands in my pockets, or don't I? And what do I wear? Like, no, now you have a choice. And what can happen for people with drift is freedom can begin to feel like a prison, because you're like, well, someone just tell me what to do. Like, what's the right answer? And you're going to begin to find there's a lot of right answers. And what's the right answer for one person might not be the right answer for you. And you know what this requires, Jonathan? It requires knowing yourself. If you begin to learn who you are and what gives you energy and what causes you to be depleted, you'll need to start to use those things to design your life. Does working out give you energy? Then you should probably start working out again. Does writing make you feel alive? Start writing. Well, I'm not getting paid to write. Who cares? Just write. Like, you use the freedom for what it is. But what I did, I want to make sure I don't forget this point. I filled everything up so I couldn't figure out who I was, and I would just let the world tell me. And my biggest recommendation to people is start to see who you are before the world told you who to be. See, people say we lost our identity. I don't think we lost it. I think we never knew it.
Once you actually have that definition, say it out loud. When you recognize something, say it out loud. Tell somebody about it. Hey, I think this is one of those indicators, one of those areas where I drift, so that you're identifying it. Because if you don't really say it out loud, then when it comes up again, you may not recognize it.
When you start to speak about it, these things that were silent and hidden lose their power. A weapon of mass deception is something that is hidden in the heart, and it spreads into other areas of life, and it affects other people. It's this mixed motive, this insecurity that we have, that it attaches itself to, and we can't explain it. We can't say why I'm so stressed out. We can't say why my marriage is falling apart. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know what's happening. We can't say why we're so angry, why we have anxiety. Instead, we just use those words. But those are symptoms of a root cause. And I believe it can be even a cultural cause. It can be something we do to ourselves. It can be events that we've experienced in life, or even interpretations of those events. I call those weapons of mass deception because I needed language to be able to explain it. Without the language, we can't create culture and we can't connect. How would I be able to tell you what I was going through if I couldn't speak right now? So we need language. And I think what's happened to our community, and by the way, I never planned on becoming an author like this, or I thought I was just gonna be a Blackhawk pilot my whole life. I think this is more of like a sense of responsibility to have to pay it forward. But what I didn't have was the words to explain what I was going through. And I couldn't even attribute it because I was like, well, I don't have trauma, so, shut it down. And what I began to see through a lot of mentorship relationships and communities and courses and conversations and deep journaling and reflection, I began to see these patterns, and slowly it became more simple. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, this is what's happening. We feel this constant pressure to perform for people in order to belong, in order to be on the team. And the reason we feel that way in our life is because that's the way our culture is. And it makes sense that it's the way it is on a, let's say an air crew. It makes sense that for an air crew, you would want someone who's a high performer, right?
Mhm.
And that if they underperform pretty consistently, they don't get to stay. But what happens when you unknowingly take that same thought process into other layers of your life? And you say, I'm underperforming in the military and now I don't belong anymore, or I'm not number one, or I'm not number three, or whatever it is. Okay. And you begin to see that this underperformance mindset and how you define it spreads into other areas. And you go, I'm underperforming in my home. Maybe I don't belong here. Maybe I'm not meant to be a husband or a father. Yeah, like maybe I'm supposed to be a drifter. Maybe I'm just supposed to go out there, give everything I got to everyone else, and give my leftovers to my family. And what I'm doing right now for you is I'm giving you the storylines and the symptoms. But if you have the exact language, you can point right to it. It becomes weaker. And now you can start to talk with others and you can begin to kind of remap your life. So one of the weapons of mass deception that I just talked to you about is called the pressure of performance.
Mhm. Mhm.
Another weapon of mass deception that I just talked to you about is called the altar of impact, sacrificing those closest to you and even yourself on the altar of impacting people you'll never meet. So see how it's in our culture? Like, yes, we want to go sacrifice, we want to go serve, we want to impact, but then we give everyone else our leftovers that are closest to us instead of seeing that that is impact also. Those are two of the four weapons of mass deception. And I go into details on like the key indicators to watch for. An example is if you feel frustrated, anxious, stressed, tense, exhausted, or run down, that spells the acronym FASTER, then the pressure performance could be the root cause. And that's what I've really worked to do, is to say, these are symptoms. What's the right language to be able to explain this and begin to even reverse engineer our life a little bit, if it makes sense?
Any closing thoughts for them, knowing that it's either service members and families who are about to reach this point, or maybe they transitioned a couple of months or even a couple of years ago and they're still working through this process? Any closing thoughts for them?
A big thing, I wouldn't have written it if I didn't mean it. I would go grab the book Weapons of Mass Deception. I really would. The Silent Struggle Within High Performers. You can get it on Amazon. You can go to our site, kingdomoperatives.com. If you want to go through like a course framework, I have that too. That's breakthepact.org. Because we need to work through this, right? You've been built in a culture of clear expectations and structure. Believe it or not, it's good for you. Structure is good. Frameworks are good when used appropriately. And I think what I needed was a framework to follow and some clear steps of people who've gone there before. And that's what we've kind of put together from my company, Kingdom Operatives, for others. So I would definitely recommend, whether it's my framework or someone else's, get a frame that you can follow. And lastly, give yourself space to change and grow. Do not hold on to the past version of you thinking that is who you are. That is how you were. That is what you did. That's how you operated, but it doesn't define exactly who you are, who you will become. So if you're on video with me right now, you see I have clenched fists, right? Holding on tightly, saying, no, I got to defend all of this of who I am. You might not know who you are, and that is absolutely okay. Open up the hands, let it go, and say, you know what? I'm going to really figure out, before the world told me who to be, who have I always been?
We've been speaking with Adam Jones, the founder of Kingdom Operatives and the author of Weapons of Mass Deception, The Silent Struggle Within Every High Performer. This is Veteran CEO Magazine, VCEO, where veterans lead the way.